So at the time, though, when Peter Navarro did circulate those memos, you were still downplaying the threat of coronavirus in the U.S. You were saying things like, "I think it's a problem that's going to go away within a
Which I'm
couple of
right
days."
about. It will go away.
You said within a couple of days the cases will be down to 0.
Well, the cases really didn't build up for a while, but you have to understand, I'm a cheerleader for this country. I don't want to create havoc and shock and everything else, but ultimately, when I was saying that, I'm also closing it down. I obviously was concerned about it because I closed down our country to China, which was heavily infected. I then closed it down to Europe. That's a big move, closing it down from China and then closing it down from Europe and then ultimately closing it down to the UK. So, and it was right about that time. But I'm not going to go out and start screaming, this could happen, this could happen. So, again, as president, I think a president has to be a cheerleader for their country. But at the same time I'm cheerleading, I'm also closing down a very highly infected place, specifically the location, as you know, in China that had the problems. And we're closing it down, but we close it down to all of China, then we close it down to all of Europe. Those were big moves, and it was right about that time.
Sir, just a quick follow-up, Mr. President.
Did you just
Mr.
learn
President.
about this today?
Say?
You learned about the memo today? Just
I read about it maybe a day ago, 2 days ago.
Do you feel like someone in among your staff or Peter Navarro himself should have told you about the memo earlier?
It was a recommendation, it was a feeling that he had. I think he told certain people in the staff, but it didn't matter. I didn't see it, but I did. I closed it down. I don't remember it even being discussed. We had a meeting where there were a lot of people. Most people felt they should not close it down, that we shouldn't close down to China, but I felt we had to do it. And that was at almost the exact same time as the memo.
If you had read the memo at the time, how would that have changed the steps you took or the
I
statements
don't think it would
that
have
you made?
changed because I did. I basically did what the memo said, and the memo was, the memo was pretty good memo from the standpoint that he took, I guess. I didn't see it yet.
He was saying that the U.S. warning that the U.S. could lose trillions of dollars and millions of lives.
Well, you're not going to lose millions of lives, but you'll lose plenty of money. But I couldn't have done it any better because it was about the same time, and I closed it down to China.
And just lastly, so you maintain confidence in him, in Peter Navarro?
Of course I maintain confidence. He wrote a memo, and he was right. And I haven't seen the memo. I'll see it later on after this. But it didn't matter whether I saw it or not because I acted on my own. I guess I had the same instincts as Peter. Peter's a smart guy, and he's a good guy, and he's done a wonderful job. But he wrote a memo, and I guess he talked to various people about it. But ultimately, I did what the memo, more or less what the memo said, just about the time the memo came out. I closed it down. I took a lot of heat. The World Health Organization was very much against. They didn't like it. They actually put out statements about it. In all fairness to Joe Biden, he called me xenophobic. Like, I don't like China. I like China. I like the Chinese people are phenomenal people. So I was called xenophobic. I was called racist. How could I do a thing like this? Now, since then, Joe said that he was wrong, and he said that I was right. But I closed it down, and I was called names by some of the morning show hosts who don't have a clue what they're talking about. They're not smart people. And I was called all sorts of names when I closed it down to China. Now they try and hide that, the tape of them saying terrible things. But that was a great decision. If I didn't do it, if I didn't do that, we would have had hundreds of thousands more people dying. Yeah, please.
You talked a lot about the WHO, and I was wondering, Dr. Fauci had discussed them earlier, so if I could ask you a question about...
Well, he respects the WHO, and I think that's good, and he's worked with them for a long time. But they did give us some pretty bad play calling.
They've also, I think, given lots of countries in the world accurate coronavirus testing that's been central to your guys' data modeling, and so...
Well, that I don't know. I can only say that with regard to us, they're taking a lot of heat, because they didn't want the borders closed. They called it wrong. They really called, I would say, every aspect of it wrong.
So it's
until
the funding freeze
I'm
does
not happy about it.
doesn't-
Look, we fund it. Take a look. I mean, go through step by step. They said there's no big deal, there's no big problem, there's no nothing. And then ultimately, when I closed it down, they actually said that I made a mistake in closing it down, and it turned out to be right. But at the time, they did that. So we're just going to take a look at it. We fund it, and they seem to be, I said recently in social media said they seem to be very China-centric. That's a nice way of saying it, but they seem to be very China-centric. And they seem to err always on the side of China. And we fund it, so I want to look into it. Yes, please.
Thanks. A quick follow-up on that. So is the time to freeze funding to the WHO during a pandemic?
No, maybe
this
not. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but we're going to look at it.
You did say that you
We give a tremendous, no, I didn't. I said, we're going to look at it. We're going to investigate it. We're going to look at it. But we will look at ending funding. Yeah. Because you know what? They called it wrong. And if you look back over the years even, they're very much, everything seems to be very biased toward China. That's not right.
I wanted to follow up. You